What if the most dangerous places on Earth aren't physical at all, but mental spaces you walk into every day? Have you noticed yourself stepping into mental places that drain you even when nothing around you looks dangerous? Comment 1 if you've felt trapped by an invisible mental habit. Comment 2 if this idea is new, but you're curious to spot one today. They don't show up on any map. You don't need a passport to enter them. And yet, they quietly erode your strength, clarity, and sense of self. Carl Jung discovered 7 such environments, 7 psychological traps that don't just disturb your mind. They reprogram it, slowly, invisibly, devastatingly. Jung encountered a patient who appeared, on the surface, completely normal. He had a stable job, a family, polite manners, and coherent thoughts. But underneath it all, he was unraveling. Dreams plagued him. Anxiety followed him. His sense of meaning had withered. He wasn't suffering from a traditional mental illness. He was being crushed by invisible architecture. Jung traced the problem to a startling insight. This man was inhabiting 7 psychological spaces each day. Not just visiting them, living in them. And these spaces, though intangible, were corrosive. They infected his relationships, distorted his decisions, and poisoned his perception of reality. Through careful dialogue and dream analysis, Jung helped him name each space, understand its mechanism, and exit its grip. The result? Mental clarity, emotional sovereignty, a return to the self. This video is about those 7 environments, and why, if you're not careful, you might be trapped in them too. Each one is subtle, seductive. They offer comfort, identity, safety. But in exchange, they take something essential: your inner power. It's one you've likely been in today, maybe without realizing it. Let's begin the journey. First place, the echo chamber. You think you're informed. You think you're evolving. But something quieter is happening. Your mind is folding in on itself. The echo chamber is not just a digital phenomenon. It's a psychological trap. Drawing on Jung's ideas about collective possession, a state in which the individual psyche is overwhelmed by group identity, we can see how personal thinking can be devoured by collective attitudes. Jung wrote about this dynamic in essays such as The Undiscovered Self. When mass psychology dominates, individuality weakens, and critical reflection fades. In such an environment, challenge disappears, and with it, so does growth. Modern research in social and cognitive neuroscience has begun to explore related effects. When people are chronically shielded from opposing views, cognitive flexibility and open-mindedness tend to decline. For example, studies at UCLA by Matthew Lieberman and others on social cognition show how our brains are wired for group belonging. While they don't prove atrophy of the prefrontal cortex, they suggest that lack of novelty or dissent can reduce our capacity for critical engagement. That's the first warning sign. You're no longer curious. Other viewpoints don't just seem incorrect, they seem threatening. Conversations become rituals of affirmation, not exploration. Your opinions feel like truths, and anyone who questions them becomes the enemy. Jung used clinical examples to show how possession by a collective attitude can distort relationships. A person may cut off even close family members when their views differ, not because of mere disagreement, but because dissent feels like betrayal. The mind, in such a state, becomes brittle, like glass, clear but fragile. One sharp idea, and it shatters. Here's the paradox. Echo chambers feel empowering, but they quietly steal your agency. They whisper, "You belong here. You're safe here." And in that safety, you lose your voice. The cost: shrinking perspective, fear of difference, a hollow dependence on the group. And perhaps worst of all, when you do begin to think differently, you doubt your sanity. The first step to reclaiming yourself is simple, but difficult. Recognize the chamber. Watch how often you agree. Notice how rare it is to be challenged. Ask, when was the last time I changed my mind? Jung taught that individuation begins with disruption. The moment you step out of the echo, into the unknown, you don't lose yourself. You begin to find it. Have you ever stepped outside an echo chamber and felt your perspective expand? Comment 1 if you've deliberately sought out a view that challenged yours. Comment 2 if you realize you've been avoiding dissent and want to try. Second, the comparison arena. You don't measure your life by truth anymore. You measure it by distance from others. How far ahead? How far behind? In Jung's patient, this began innocently. Small glances at friends' careers, houses, salaries. Soon, each look became a verdict. Someone else's rise translated into his fall. Success ceased to be meaning. It became mathematics. Jung would call this a distortion of value through the persona's hunger for status. The authentic self, the archetypal core that wants wholeness, gets eclipsed by the persona's scoreboard, and the psyche begins to oscillate between inflation and deflation. On Monday, you're superior. On Tuesday, you're nothing. You never land in your center. Modern findings echo this pattern. When chronic comparison dominates attention, executive regions of the prefrontal cortex, critical for self-appraisal and wise decision-making, show reduced engagement. In other words, the more you compare, the less accurately you can sense who you actually are. The instrument that should tune you to your inner note goes out of tune. The patient lived this cycle viscerally. He earned a promotion, objectively significant, but it paled beside a friend's leap to CEO. His joy evaporated in the shadow of another's story. Jung called attention to the complex, an emotionally charged knot in the psyche that had formed around status. Each social encounter tightened the knot. Each comparison pulled the string. Warning signs that you're inside this arena are deceptively simple. Another person's victory stings like your defeat. Your achievements feel counterfeit unless they eclipse someone else's. You edit your life for optics, not alignment. Your happiness depends on a leaderboard that never stops refreshing. But what's the deeper cost? You become unmoored from values. Desire is outsourced. You pursue images, not meaning. The self, the guiding center that Jung believed orients us toward individuation, loses authority to an external algorithm of worth. You run faster, but the track is a loop, a metaphor. Imagine borrowing a compass that points to wherever the most people are walking. It will always point you into crowds, never into your path. That's the comparison compass. It finds attention, not direction. To step out, Jung guided the patient to reframe success as congruence. Not, am I ahead, but is my life mine? He asked him to track felt sense signals, the subtle yes, no of the body, a nod toward Jung's respect for somatic wisdom. After decisions, did the chest open or constrict? Did the breath ease or harden? Slowly, the patient began to choose for alignment over applause, and something shifted. The scoreboard quieted. He could celebrate others without diminishing himself. He began to author his own metrics. Third, the performance theater. You learn the script before you feel your lines. You laugh when you don't find it funny, nod when you disagree, polish yourself until you disappear. This is the performance theater, where authenticity is penalized and the mask, Jung's persona, is rewarded. The tool becomes a cage. Approval turns into oxygen, and you confuse the role with your face. Without self-compassion, Kristen Neff, the inner critic becomes a relentless stage manager. Even alone, you're still performing. The signs are quiet, but clear. Fatigue after social scenes, a recoil right after you say yes, opinions that sound rehearsed, fear of spontaneity. Relationships grow brittle because people attach to the character, not to you. Each tiny self-betrayal is survivable. Their sum is soul-thinning. Jung's remedy is disidentification by small bravery. Say one true sentence where you'd usually please. Let a short silence stand. Admit a doubt, and notice the sky doesn't fall. Tell yourself, I want to be liked, and I won't lie to be loved. The patient tried this in microdoses and discovered the paradox. Disappointing others is finite. Disappointing yourself is bottomless. As truth replaced performance, breath returned, and the self resumed the lead. Fouth, the silent suffering space. You call it peace because no one raises their voice. You call it love because everyone shows up for dinner. But nothing real is said, and nothing raw is welcomed. This is the silent suffering space, where appearances pass for intimacy, and pain is politely exiled. Jung would call it emotional starvation. Needs are presumed, not met. Affection is implied, not spoken. The patient came from a perfect family. No fights, but no truth. He learned that needs are selfish, and vulnerability is weakness. So his feelings went underground and returned as anxiety, numbness, and a constant sense that something was missing. When emotions are chronically suppressed, the nervous system runs hot in the background. You look calm. Inside, you're bracing. The telltales? Loneliness in a crowded house. Coping instead of healing. A belief that asking for support is burdensome. Big feelings with no safe container. A peace so brittle it can't survive a hard question. Let's imagine museum of smiles. Quiet, polished, temperature-controlled, where living things are not allowed. Relationships in this space preserve image and starve contact. The cure begins with naming. One honest sentence breaks the spell. I felt hurt when... Then the next skill, containment. Choose a time, stay with one feeling, ask for one specific need. In Jungian terms, you are reclaiming disowned affect from the unconscious and giving it language, place, and ritual. The patient practiced tiny bids for connection, tolerated the first awkward silences, and watched a deeper truth emerge. Conflict did not destroy the bond. Pretense did. Real talk didn't end peace. It finally created it. Fifth, the chaos storm. You stay informed, available, productive, and quietly fragmented. This is the chaos storm. Relentless inputs, news, chats, meetings, alerts that drown out the inner voice. The patient stacked stimulation to avoid silence, because silence threatened to surface unresolved pain. Jung would call the result psychic fragmentation, bits of consciousness that never integrate, so experience can't become wisdom. You collect facts, but lose meaning. Neuroscience aligns here. Adam Gazzaley. Chronic distraction overloads the prefrontal cortex, degrading working memory and impulse control. From the inside, it feels like urgency without clarity, strong opinions with shallow roots, busyness with no narrative, anxiety. The second things get quiet. You're always on, yet strangely absent from your own life, drinking from 7 faucets while dying of thirst. The more you consume, the less you absorb. Jung's correction is rhythmic containment to invite integration. Create micro-rituals of stillness. 5 undistracted minutes after transitions. Single task with a visible boundary, timer plus airplane mode. End the day with a brief active imagination or reflective jot. What asked for my attention today? What do I choose for tomorrow? The patient practiced white space reps, short, frequent silences that initially spiked anxiety, then softened it. When the noise receded, intuition reappeared. Decisions simplified. He didn't need more information. He needed more integration. Sixth, the self-abandonment chamber. You say yes when your gut says no. You stay where your soul has already left. You choose safety over truth until safety feels like suffocation. This is the self-abandonment chamber, a slow drifting away from your own center. At first it looks like maturity. Be agreeable, be reliable, be what's expected. Then, one day, you notice you no longer have preferences, only obligations. Your body stops sending clear signals, or you stop listening. You wake, work, please, perform, sleep, on a loop that never asks who you are. Do you recognize moments where you say yes, while your gut says no? Comment 1 if you've set a boundary this month. Comment 2 if you're ready to set one this week. Inside, the signs are quiet, but relentless. Decisions made to avoid disappointing others. An autopilot schedule that erases spontaneity. A polite numbness where joy should be. You don't check in with your feelings because you fear the answer. The part of you that once said this way has gone hoarse from being ignored. Jung would call this soul loss, the estrangement of the ego from the self. When you trade your inner authority for external approval, life becomes technically successful and spiritually empty. You can win by every public metric and still feel hollow because the victories don't belong to you. The exit begins with small vows kept in private. Ask, before you answer, what do I truly want here? Say no once where you'd normally comply. Choose one honest hour each week and spend it on something that feels alive rather than impressive. Let your instincts back onto the stage, even if their voice trembles. The paradox is consistent. The world rarely collapses when you disappoint it a little, but your inner world collapses when you abandon it a lot. As you honor what is true over what is tidy, color returns, energy follows alignment, and the compass you thought you lost begins to point home. 7th, the shadow basement. You don't delete parts of yourself, you exile them. That exile is the shadow basement. Anger, envy, grief, shame, fear locked away so you can function. What's disowned returns as fate. Repeat partners, disproportionate reactions, harsh judgments of traits you secretly carry. The louder you insist, not me, the tighter it grips the wheel. Think of trunks labeled too much, weak, dangerous. They once protected you, now they run you. The shift begins with curious, non-judgmental contact. When a strong emotion hits, pause. Name it. Feel where it lives in the body. Ask what it wants for you, not from you. Anger may guard a boundary. Envy may point to unlived life. Shame may shelter a younger self. Offer one clean action. State a limit. Take a step toward the life you envy. Give yourself rest or care you once missed. Integration is humble and daily. The goal isn't to conquer the dark, but to befriend it. And here's the payoff. The basement holds your wealth as well as your wounds. Anger into courage, grief into depth, shame into compassion. You don't become someone new. You become someone whole. Here's the way out. The spine of Jung's individuation translated into daily practice. It isn't dramatic. It's disciplined. Conscious recognition. Name the rooms you inhabit. Write them plainly. Echo chamber, comparison arena, performance theater, silent suffering, chaos storm, self-abandonment, shadow basement. Next to each, note one concrete behavior that proves you're there. Naming turns fog into furniture. Environmental audit. Walk through your physical and digital spaces with one question. Does this help me grow or keep me numb? Prune feeds, mute threads. Step back from rooms that reward conformity over truth. Rearrange your desk, calendar, and commitments to signal your new direction. Environments train nervous systems. Choose yours on purpose. Strategic withdrawal. You don't need to burn bridges. You need to build boundaries. Reduce exposure in measured doses. Fewer club nights where everyone agrees. Fewer comparison triggers. Fewer meetings that demand performance over honesty. Introduce solitude, even if it first feels like panic. Withdrawal isn't avoidance, it's detox. Conscious integration. Add what nourishes the self. One relationship where you can be unedited. One practice that returns you to your center. Journaling, contemplative walks, breathwork. One community that values inquiry over certainty. Replace noise with rhythms. Weekly reflection, device-free mornings, deep work blocks. Integration is repetition with meaning. Shadow work. Meet what you exiled. When a strong reaction arrives, pause, name, locate, and ask what it protects. Translate the message into a clean behavior. Set a boundary. Grieve a loss. Take a modest risk toward the life you envy. If possible, do this with a skilled therapist or a trusted guide. The aim is neither confession nor catharsis, but relationship. Regular maintenance. Toxic spaces are seductive. Schedule audits monthly. Notice creep. The mask sneaks back. The feed refills. The calendar bloats. Re-choose. Small corrections prevent large collapses. Sovereignty is sustained, not granted. Work these steps in loops, not lines. Expect awkwardness. Expect resistance, from you and from others. But also expect a return of energy, clarity, and quiet confidence as your life reorients around what is true, rather than what is tolerated. Here is the simple, difficult truth. The 7 places are not out there. They are habits of attention, loyalties of fear, reflexes of longing. They are learned, and therefore they are unlearned. The mind that wandered into them can walk out. You don't need to overthrow your life. You need to re-own it in small, faithful movements. One honest sentence. One boundary set before resentment grows teeth. 1 hour of white space protected like a life. 1 step toward the life you envy enough to criticize. 1 look at the thing you've buried, held with gentleness instead of judgment. This is not spectacle. This is sovereignty. Let yourself imagine the alternative. A day in which your thinking is yours again. Your joy answers to meaning, not measurement. Your words come unmasked. Your family conversations include tenderness and truth. Your calendar has margins. Your choices reflect your center. Your shadow sits beside you, no longer driving from the dark. Nothing flashy, just a steadier pulse, a clearer gaze, a quieter courage. The world will still try to rent space in you. But you will know the rooms now, and you will choose the ones with windows. Ask, right now, which room took me today? What proof do I have? What one move would reverse it? Then, do the next small brave thing. Repeat tomorrow. Repetition is how grooves become paths, how paths become places, how places become a life. You are not behind. You are at a doorway. Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." Let that be permission, not indictment. Fate becomes authorship the moment you turn toward what you've been avoiding and name it. Name the echo, the arena, the theater, the silence, the storm, the chamber, the basement. Choose your exits. Choose your allies. Choose yourself. Begin here. Your mind is not the enemy, but the places it inhabits might be. Name them and step out. Which room are you leaving first? And what's the one small move you'll make? Comment 1 if you'll name 1 room in writing today. Comment 2 if you'll take 1 action, a boundary, a honest sentence, or 5 minutes of white space.